Welcome to Health, Harmony, and Happiness with Kathy. I'm your host, Kathy Stricker. I'm a wife to a law enforcement officer and mama to 3 lively littles. I'm a business owner, yoga teacher, health coach, and wellness and life enthusiast. And what I really like doing is connecting others like you with resources that could bring you health, harmony, and happiness on your life journey. These 3 elements are a result of that inner light that flows naturally through you and brings contentment. They happen when you seek to live mindfully as your best self and tune in to following this inner guidance. May this podcast serve as a nudge to discover tools that could help you on your path towards more conscious living. Hey friends! Today's episode is going to be a bit different. In honor of Mother's Day coming up this weekend, I'm going to share with you a couple of pieces that I wrote for a blog I had called Counting My Little Blessings back after my first child, Huck, was born. Since writing this first post that I'm going to share with you, I have grown tremendously as a mother and as a person. 6 years, I guess, will do that to you. Life is definitely different now. The fussy baby that we encountered with our first child has made the other 2 seem like a walk in the park for the most part. Sure, we had struggles with both of them as well, but after Huck, it maybe just seemed that it was more manageable because we had this beautiful perspective that there was an end in sight. When you're a first-time mom, no matter how much someone tells you otherwise, you think that the sleepless nights are never going to end. You think that the crying that can't be soothed will never end. And then you have this realization that you are now and forever connected to another human that you grew and created. And so a little part of that freedom that you had is now gone. And it's scary. And it's this realization that you're captured by this other person almost. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's so beautiful and so wonderful and something to appreciate so much. But on the other hand, it can also feel like you're giving up a part of yourself. And that's normal. And so this message today goes out to expecting moms and maybe those new moms who have a new little one at home. Even if it's not your first, some of these thoughts and concepts I think may resonate with you. And I'm going to add bits and pieces in between each essay to hopefully reflect on and give you insights or thoughts on what life is like now with 3 kids rather than just the one. This first essay I wrote is called 12 Weeks, and I had written it March 22nd, 2014. Here goes. My handsome son turned 12 weeks old today, and I have one more day with him before I return to work on Monday and end my maternity leave. This past 12 weeks has certainly not been what I thought it would be. When my husband and I welcomed our little monkey into this world, we never could have imagined how life would change and how difficult things would become. I mean, I don't know why we didn't anticipate a challenging first 3 months after the 19 hours of induced labor, 2 hours of pushing, and ending with a difficult C-section in which my son's head was stuck in my pelvis after waiting an extra 10 days beyond my due date to deliver. Then coming to find out that our son was still biologically born at 39 weeks. No wonder he wasn't ready to come out and meet the world. In any case, here I sit, up at night, pumping in hopes that my son will stay asleep just a bit longer tonight as we work on crying it out this week so that when I go back to work on Monday, he just might sleep a bit longer at night. He has always gained weight well and been healthy, so we knew that this would be an okay option for us to try. It occurred to me today that much like my husband and me, our little guy has extreme willpower and determination, and crying it out doesn't necessarily seem to wear him down and put him to sleep. I don't know why I would have thought he would be any different. Our little man has been anything but an easy baby, so fussiness and soothing pretty much became our norm early on in his life. However, we have always been able to soothe him and get him pacified eventually. Right around 9 weeks, his crying started getting worse, and after a week and a half or so, I called the doctor, who said it sounded like a classic case of colic. Well, I'm not sure I was satisfied with that answer, so I continued reading Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child, which, in my opinion at the time, was the most disorganized book to read, but it did have some good points about sleeping, so I started to pay more attention to my son's sleep habits and realized that he must not be getting enough sleep. Since writing this, I have come to love that book, and I kind of treat it as my sleep Bible for all of my children when different phases start appearing, or they change ages, or things just start to not be working with their sleep. I refer back to this book. It's a great one, and I will link to it in the show notes. Okay, back to the blog post. So remember that I had just told you that he was a pretty fussy baby and a hard to soothe baby. So crying it out this past week has been rough, but about midweek there was a peak where it started to get better. And just when I thought I had it figured out, we come across a day like today. Not much sleep last night means a cranky baby and mommy today. It's these days where, as a mama and wife, I begin to feel like a failure. Inadequate because I can't even seem to get my own baby to go to sleep when letting him cry, and guilty because of how I react to my husband's efforts to contribute or not contribute because he thinks I have it under control. I know that I'm too hard on myself, but just can't seem to understand why so many other new moms I know don't seem to have these struggles, or at least don't talk about them if they do. Have I been too inconsistent with my responses to my baby? It's made me question whether or not I'm cut out for this parenthood thing. All I've wanted for as long as I can remember is to be a mom. My husband and I struggled to get pregnant for about a year and a half, so throughout the past 12 weeks, I've told myself I cannot complain because this is what I wanted, what I had prayed so often for, what I had spent so much of my time wanting, and now I have it, and am faced with the struggle of a fussy baby. But I feel bad crying to close friends and family members because I, quote, should be able to handle this. After all, this is what I had asked God to bring us, a baby. I'm sure many of my thoughts and feelings are stemming from the fact that I'm returning to a job I don't exactly love, and the pursuit of my real dream job has been put on hold. Foolishly, in my mind, prior to having my son, I planned to work on those goals of beginning my own business while I was on maternity leave. Nothing too complex, just easy, simple things that I could do on the computer or at home while the baby was sleeping, between feeding when my husband was available to watch the baby, and between endless loads of anticipated laundry. Ha! Was I in for a wake-up call? I never dreamed what it would actually be like, especially with that fussy baby who wanted to be held all the time, who needed almost constant soothing at some points, and who would want to nurse every 2 to 3 hours. I never imagined how much energy would be sucked from your life by caring for this little creature. Well, I'm here to say that I've spent the past 12 weeks learning about my son, trying to figure him out and getting to know his every need. I've struggled with breastfeeding, first worried he wasn't getting enough to eat, and then worrying that my milk was coming out too fast and I had an oversupply, so he wasn't getting the right balance of foremilk and hindmilk, and stewing about why he spits up so much. I researched the heck out of breastfeeding and all the possible causes and things that could be going wrong or not working right or as anticipated. I've sat up in the middle of the night nursing and questioning if I made the right choice in even having a child, feeling alone and wondering if I'll ever be able to get 4 consecutive hours of sleep again. I've cried for hours on end because I can't seem to figure out what's wrong with my precious little baby, and wanting to make his hurt go away or fulfill his need, but not knowing what that need is. I've worried about holding him too much and creating bad habits for him. I've been challenged with a period of weeks that my husband was away for work during the week, so the care of our son was all on me. 24 hours a day with no other relief help to figure out how to get him to sleep or to stop crying. I felt bad for and wondered how single moms can do all this, and thought if they can, then I surely should be able to. I've wondered why someone else hasn't been able to figure out how to make the first 4 to 6 weeks of a baby's life easier on the parents, and how other people survived this time. When Huck was 5 weeks old, we were displaced from our home for about a week because of a plumbing problem. And you can probably imagine that was super difficult. We had to stay at a friend's home because we didn't know when we would be able to go back into our house. And of course, that added stress because we weren't at home. And we had a newborn, so already stress. And then we were encroaching on someone else's life as well for an entire week. I've watched the clock turn 2 hours in the middle of the night while nursing, pumping, or soothing my baby, and felt as though it had only been 20 minutes while my husband slept peacefully or was away on work. And I've also watched the clock turn 2 hours while waiting for Huck to stop crying and find sleep and sweet dreams, and felt as though it had been an eternity. I've prayed abundantly for sleep for my son and patience for his parents when trying to help him. I've cried many tears worrying that I'm not doing what's best for my baby and for me, worrying that if he cries a second longer, I might hurt him. I've even gone through a time of resentment and anger towards him for making me lose so much sleep and for making me set my dreams aside. I'm not happy about these dark thoughts, but I have to face the fact that they have been present and in my mind during this joyous time of my life, and it's not been easy. I have to constantly remind myself to be present in this moment and enjoy this time that I have been given. My daily yoga practice has helped me cope, but I have to admit that there are days that I'm so tired and frustrated and probably need my practice the most that I set it aside. That the nourishment and fulfillment I receive from doing something for my spirit, mind, and body is just too much to conquer on that day. And my husband doesn't always know what to say or do to help me feel better. But then again, he didn't always know before we had the baby either. So I need to remember that we are two separate people and to be more patient with him. We are in this together and learning as we go. I need to communicate my feelings better with him and to help him understand where this overtired mama is coming from. And somehow, when I've reached the peak of frustration and tiredness, God seems to put someone or something in place to renew my faith and help me feel refreshed and able to conquer mommyhood once again. When you start out in pregnancy, the first 12 weeks seem like an eternity, waiting for the excitement to share your joy with others and to enter that safe zone. Then, after you've met your creation for the first time, the first 12 weeks of life go by faster than you could ever believe. And as I prepare to return to work on Monday, I'm torn between wanting to work just so I can have a break from my little man when he's fussy, but not wanting to return to a job that doesn't fill my bucket and end my time caring for him full time. Knowing this, I must trust the plan that is out there for me and that everything is just as it should be. Beginning my yoga and wellness business will still be a reality. It just may not come as soon as I had hoped. The difficult times do and shall pass, and there will always be a new challenge to face. And in the end, it's actually your perspective on life that brings you through each one of these little blessings. There was definitely some stuff that I went through in that postpartum period after having Huck and being a brand new mom and having this challenging baby and no family living in the area. It brings me such gratitude to know that even though it was hard, the timing of all of that was absolutely beautiful. Before, when we were struggling to get pregnant, we didn't have the roots in place. We didn't have the connections in place and the things that needed to be there to help support me and us during that time. But in the end, all the people that came into our lives during my pregnancy and just before were strategically placed there by some higher being. I like to think it's God, to help us through that period of time. And once we figured out his sleep rhythms and how to get him to sleep. You've heard me say this in previous podcasts before, if you've listened for a while. It changed our life, and he started sleeping, and he was such a different kid, so critical. And that book, Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child, like I said, is just one that I refer to so often. But with our girls, it was a completely different story with sleep. And since it's so fresh in my mind with Lulu, I mean, she first slept through the night the day before I went back to work, or the night I was going back to work, which was a huge, huge blessing. I kind of had a conversation with her before she went to bed and just did some affirmations and told her, you sleep soundly through the night and you fall asleep quickly and easily. And sure enough, she did. Shocked me completely. And with Scout, she would just put her thumb in her mouth and roll over onto her side and fall asleep right away. We kind of hit the lottery with that one. I don't know. But we paced many hours and bounced many hours with Huck to try to get him soothed and asleep. And what an emotional time in my life. But I made it through it, and I learned so much as a parent. I know that you can't hold a baby too much when they are so young, and that the importance of that fourth trimester, those 12 weeks after you give birth, are so critical, because they're out in the world and they were used to being in this nice, warm, cozy place. And the update on my job satisfaction back then, 6 months later, I ended up quitting that job to start my yoga and wellness business full-time and to pursue that. So just so many things after I read that and when I read that blog post that have changed and have added more health, harmony, and happiness in my life and in our family's life. This next blog post that I'm going to read and share with you is one that happened about 4 months after Huck was born. And in it, I just share some realities that I realized and that I came to know as truths, I guess, after introducing children into our lives. So this post is from the Counting My Little Blessings blog on April 6th, 2014. This week, my husband Matt and I will celebrate our 4-year anniversary. The best advice I ever got before we got married actually came from my mom. She told me that no matter what happens in life, kids, job, hard times, remember that the most important thing in your marriage is your relationship with Matt. Pretty good advice, Mom. And I have to admit, I too often let this slip back to the back of my mind rather than keeping it at the front. But I was reminded of it yet again this past week when planning a time this coming week that we could spend some time together to celebrate our marriage. Time away from our infant, just the two of us, just like it used to be, sort of. Except that now we have this little person in our lives that I'm sure we'll find ourselves talking about. At least that's what everyone says will happen, right? I shared this bit of advice when visiting with my good friend the other day, who had just about a month left in her pregnancy and is getting to the anxious stage of wanting to get so much done before baby arrives and continuing to worry about the birth process and being a new parent. What's important and what's not important. I told her to really pay attention to that piece of advice that my mom gave me because it is so true, yet an easy one to set aside. Now, I have always had a very strong connection with this friend since I met her a few years back when I started the job I am in now, and she too was in the same role, also a remote worker. So we would spend hours on the phone talking not only about work, but life as well, and always seemed to know when each other was thinking about the other person and needed a phone call. She was just one of those really great friends that you have that instant connection with. I had a feeling she was pregnant before she knew she was pregnant, so was thrilled when she called and told me the news. I have so cherished the conversations I've had with this friend throughout our pregnancies, especially after having my sweet little Huck, because she doesn't hesitate to call and ask questions that any soon-to-be mommy has. Questions in which the answers are so fresh in my mind and life that I can easily give her my opinion and feedback. Sure, she has sisters and other friends who have had kids, but I take it as a huge compliment that she calls me with these questions. And maybe it's just because she knows I'll be brutally honest with her and tell her how it actually is. I guess you could say that's always been one of my strengths, maybe. Although I know it has come back to bite me at times in life, in others, it can be quite helpful. But I guess since we've had similar situations in life and through work, she trusts my judgment and insight. In the past few months, we've talked about everything from labor and delivery options to C-section recovery, nursing supplies, and bras to be okay with choosing not to breastfeed, and ultimately appreciating life now, before the baby, to coping with how much life changes after the baby. In the end, she will have to figure out what works best for her and her family, but it sure helps to have someone to ask some of those uncomfortable questions to, in hopes that it will somewhat prepare you for what's soon to come. Something that you really can't prepare for until it actually happens, because you discover you indeed have no control over it. I'm no expert by any means, especially since I am only 3 months into being a mama. And as with any new baby, it's a trial and error process in survival mode of new parenthood. But I have recognized 3 truths throughout the past year of pregnancy and being a new mom. The first one is letting go of control. Early on in my pregnancy, I had an aunt who told me how she thought pregnancy was such a beautiful thing and that it completely prepares you for being a parent. You lose control of what's happening to your body, and much like parenthood, you think you have control over your baby or child because you are the adult and the parent. But ultimately, they have their own minds and are going to do what they want to do. Boy, has this been clear to me raising a fussy baby. I'm learning to accept the fact that I can do everything in my power to make Huck as comfortable as possible and meet all of his needs. But he is the one deciding to be happy or fussy, and I can't do much about that. It took me a really long time to have this sort of acceptance in my pregnancy because I have always worked very hard to maintain my fitness level and body. So to have to give that control up and accept the changes that were happening was super difficult. Perhaps that's partly why I have such a spirited, strong-willed baby. Perhaps it's a reflection of who I was mentally during much of my pregnancy. I'll never know for sure, but it's certainly a connection that could be made. The second truth or reality that I discovered was making time for the number one relationship. I already touched on this one earlier. It's so important to keep this focus because if the relationship between you and your spouse is not strong, nothing else will be in your family. It's definitely hard to do when so many hormones are trying to find balance once again in your body, leaving you an emotional mess, when you are learning how to be a mom and potentially struggling with bonding with your new baby, as well as learning to accept the changes that you now see in your body every time you look in the mirror, worrying about how others, and more importantly, your husband now sees you, now sees that new permanent line marking your body, reminding you both of the trauma your body went through so that you could meet your new precious baby. And perhaps for others, it's the weight gain or the stretch marks that now hold true as a reminder of your baby. All things that can interfere with your relationship if you let them. And the third thing is accepting your beautiful body. The last truth I've recognized is true acceptance of my body for what it now is. Each physical change that I now see is a beautiful reminder of the joy of God's true miracle, life, a new life, and proof that we are living creatures capable of creating life. Therefore, I choose to look not at these permanent marks and changes as negative things I have to live with, but rather to embrace them and be happy with who I now am, because I am going to be able to share the world with a child. I get to teach him to admire the world around him and to grow into a happy, successful, contributing member of society. And creating this life wouldn't be possible without gaining some beautiful battle wounds. So each time you look at those wounds, be happy for who you are and what you have done. Each of these realities still challenges me at times, but using them to guide how I live and adapt to parenthood will hopefully allow me to teach my child about the important things in life. Okay, friends, so if you are an expectant mama and you don't have that friend who is already a mama and will be brutally honest with you and will give you the lowdown on everything, find that person. Because there are so many questions I know that you have and so many things that you want to know about. And for some of you, if you're like me, you wanted to have everything planned and know exactly how things were going to go. But that letting go of control is one of the most beautiful things that you possibly can do. You're flowing with life. Your body is working so hard to create life without you even having to think about it, that it's okay if you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Prepare yourself for everything. I never anticipated having a C-section, but that's the way that it ended up for me. And in the end, after 3 of my children and my third one being a VBAC, it was just the beautiful plan of life. And my kids' personalities directly reflect who I was in my pregnancy, and that's amazing because I was different with each one of them. Now, even if you have kids and you are not the biological parent, these truths are still very evident. Letting go of control and just trusting that they have their own minds. My goodness, I still go over and over with my 6-year-old about this one. So I'm super glad that I'm reading this again in this time of my life, because it just needs to be imprinted in my brain and brought back to me to remind me that he is his own person and he's going to make those decisions and choices, and there's nothing I can do about it. That second one, making time for the number one relationship. If you have a spouse or a partner in your life that you are raising children with, it is so crucial, and I'm speaking to myself here too, to take time and to be intentional about that. I'm going to share with you a little bit of a thing that my husband and I did for Christmas this year. We created an experience file, and each month there's a different date idea that we are supposed to do. It occurred to me today that we never actually completed April. Here we are in May. And we didn't really ever complete March. We did part of it, but we didn't complete it. So we're taking baby steps. Same with April. We did part of it, but we didn't complete it. And I realized that we're not making that a priority. And yes, it's hard during this quarantine time to find time to ourselves when we can't get a babysitter, but that's still the number one thing. And your kids pick up on that. If you're not getting along, if one parent is doing something one way and the other parent's not on the same page, kids will pick up on that. They know it, and then they know how to work you. So make time for that relationship. And then that last one is accepting your beautiful body. And I cannot stress this one enough either. No matter how many pregnancies you've been through, it is a direct reflection that God has given you the ability as a beautiful woman, feminine, divine, to create life and to give birth. That's sometimes a hard reality to come to terms with and to be okay with whatever changes your body has undergone. But do your best to embrace it. It makes a world of difference when you can accept those changes. Okay, this last post is a poem that I wrote on the first Mother's Day that we celebrated with him in our lives. And during this time, my husband was actually working as a drill instructor at the State Patrol Academy. And so he would leave on Sundays and then be gone for the entire week. And this particular day, he was either getting ready to leave, I remember, or had just left when I sat down and had some free time to myself while Huck was sleeping to write. And here's what came out. Dear sweet baby Huck, I hold you in my arms, thinking of all the things that make you my beautiful son. Your tiny fingers reach for me, grasp my hand, and this physical touch goes deeper. An invisible cord connecting us, a force far greater than you or I will ever comprehend. You know my presence at all times, sensing our bond even when we are apart. You drift off to sleep, a watchful eye always on me, then flash a smile. I wonder what you dream of, who you'll be someday. Your precious breath reminds me I gave you life. 4 months have passed without ease, but frustrations with challenges raising such a spirited baby. Your gift of life, of energy, of infinite love is the best gift ever received this first Mother's Day of mine. You are my baby. I love you always and forever. These essays are reflections of parenthood from a new mom. And now as an experienced mama, of course my perspective has changed on some things. And of course there are ways that I have raised my children just a bit differently. But no matter where you are on the path of motherhood, embrace the feminine energy within you to create, to nurture, to love, and to appreciate the divine wisdom that your body holds. Thanks so much for listening to these past reflections that I had on being a mother. And if you know someone who could benefit from hearing this episode today, please share it with them. Find links to these original blog posts at KarenYogaWellness.com/podcast34, as well as any resources I may have mentioned in this episode. Thanks for subscribing and being a part of the show. Cheers to cultivating more health, harmony, and happiness in your life. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, help us grow this podcast by sharing it with even just one other person. And it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment of your time to write a review. Your comments and feedback are what help me continue to bring you topics and guests that can help you and others on their journey in creating health, harmony, and happiness. Remember to head on over to KarenYogaWellness.com to get the show notes and links from today's episode. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Karen Yoga Wellness, and to continue connecting with more resources that could help you enhance health, harmony, and happiness in your own life, subscribe to this podcast. Thanks again for listening.